This is Fanfiction only. Yaimpar at te Jetii, A Return to the Jedi, by Matthew Tanmar Copper.
Ossus, 45 years after the Battle of Yavin.
The Jedi Master sat in a meditative, cross-legged position, overlooking the Jedi Academy. Though only a few hundred yards away, the ancient stone building still looked as close as ever. He used the Force to see the various life forms walking to and fro, off to who knows where. For reasons known only to the Force, he began to remember his youth on... No, he was not going to remember his past. A past he vaped more than 33 years ago. "Master," said the voice of Nadar, Tanmar's latest Padawan. "Yes, Nadar, what is it?" Tanmar replied. "It is near the appointed hour, Master," Nadar replied. "Then let's not keep the Force waiting," Tanmar finally said, smiling. This was a joke Tanmar had with his Padawan. The two walked from their current location to an area 50 meters away. In this location, younglings were practicing with their practice sabers. As Tanmar approached the area, Master Val ordered her students to turn off their sabers. She then looked toward Tanmar and Nadar and gave them a nod, greeting them.
"Younglings, for many weeks now, a master has stopped by to show you the many forms of lightsaber combat," Master Val began.
The younglings started to look bored.
"Today we have a master who will show you how to fight with not one, but with two lightsabers," Master Val continued.
The younglings' interest perked up.
"I would like to introduce you to Master Dioro,"
Master Val introduced.
Good afternoon, Master Dioro,"
the younglings said together. "Good afternoon, fellow children of the Force," Tanmar replied. After 2 hours of instruction, the class was dismissed. As the younglings left to their homes, Tanmar walked up to Master Val to talk to her. "Juno, I have been tasked to deliver those of my blood to our home," Tanmar said.
"Of course, Tanmar,"
said Juno. So it was that Tanmar and Nadar took Tanmar's 7 Buad, their grandchildren, and headed to the Dioro household. Several hours later, in the Dioro home, there was chaos in the living room.
"But Babuir,"
grandparent Alla, Tanmar's oldest grandchild, began.
"I am Shane, 8 years old, and my Buir,
mother,
said..."
"My Ad, in this case daughter, has placed your well-being in my charge. While she and your Buir, father, are out serving the Order, you will ijat honor my status as your Babuir and Jetii, Jedi Master," Tanmar strictly countered.
"Yes, Babuir,"
Alla finally said dejectedly, bowing her head. With that, Tanmar went on to the subject at hand. "Now, my Ki Verda, small warriors, it is time for you to head to bed." 10 minutes later, with all of the children in bed, Tanmar asked them, "What story do my Ki Verda wish to hear tonight?" From the far end of the room, a small voice said,
"Babuir, I wish to hear how you joined the Order."
As if the very words were a spark of fire, the rest of the room voiced their agreement. Why am I not surprised that one named Amidala would be the spark of agreement? Tanmar relented. Looking at his Buad, Tanmar began. "It started almost 33 years ago on the planet Tanab. I had just tracked a bounty in the area. They had got the drop on me, and in the resulting blaster fight, I was wounded. By the time I reached my ship, I had to start the healing trance. I passed out 3 feet from my ship, and when I woke up, I was not on the planet."
Location: New Republic Imperial II Class Star Destroyer Freedom. Destination: Yavin 4. Time: 11.9 years after the Battle of Yavin.
The first thing that stuck out about Tanmar's surroundings was the noise of the area around him. Instead of the blowing of wind or the sound of animals, he heard the beeping of machines and the sound of beings whispering to one another. The second thing was the smell of his surroundings. No smell of nature. In fact, there was no smell at all. Using the Force, Tanmar stretched out his senses to get a better perspective of his surroundings. He found out that there was a group of 6 beings 10 yards to his right, another 5 to his left, and there was a great brightness in front of him. Yet it was the brightness that concerned him the most. It was in the shape of a man, but that was it. Before he opened his eyes, Tanmar heard a voice coming from the brightness. "I see you are awake," the voice said. Tanmar still played the unconscious sleeper. "Please, I don't need the Force to see that you are awake," the voice then continued. "Sure, you are fooling everyone else, but I can see you are assessing possible threats in the area." Tanmar decided to open his eyes. What he saw was not what he was expecting. The brightness was actually a man, a little older than him. The man had blonde hair and a face that looked wiser than it should be. "Good. Now for introductions," the man started. "I am Luke Skywalker, Master of the New Jedi Order, and the person who found you on Tanab." Tanmar just stared at this Luke Skywalker. "Anyway," Skywalker continued, "I found you and brought you, your ship and your R4 unit, to this vessel, the Imperial II class Star Destroyer Freedom. You are currently in the Freedom's medbay." "Why am I here?" Tanmar began in his native Mandoa. "Am I your prisoner?" Skywalker looked at Tanmar as if confused. "You know, as well as I, that you can speak Basic," Skywalker started. "Even I can see, through the Force, mind you, that you wanted to speak to me in Basic." Tanmar was stunned this man before him was truly a Jetii, a Jedi. "You have not answered my questions, Jetii," Tanmar finally said in Basic. "True," Skywalker said. "You are here because your injuries were beyond what any Force trance could repair. Second, you are no one's prisoner." "That is not the whole truth, is it?" Tanmar countered. "There is more you want from me." "Again, that is a true statement," Skywalker started. "I can tell you have been trained as a Jedi, though not as well trained as I have been." Tanmar just stared at the Jedi Master. Skywalker finally got to his point. "What I want to do is finish your training and possibly have you join the new Jedi Order." "What of my family?" Tanmar started. "I have a wife and 2 children that depend on me. What of clothing, food, and a home that I need to provide them? Is it not the will of your order to have such attachments?" For a few minutes, Skywalker looked at Tanmar, and then he replied, "That was the order of the Old Republic. As the Master of the new Jedi Order, I have seen that such old tenets were one of many reasons that may have led to the downfall of the Old Order." Tanmar looked at Luke unconvinced. "One of the candidates that I have found," Luke began, "has such an attachment. Though he is from Corellia isn't a factor in the decision for this subject," Luke continued. "The fact is there are few right now whom I can find to restore the Order, and cloning is not an option." Tanmar laid in bed thinking about the Jedi Master's words. Sometime later, Tanmar finally spoke. "I will go with you to your order. If I am convinced that your order is worthy of my time, I will talk to my Ridur spouse to accompany me."
Time, 2 weeks later. Location, Grand Temple, Jedi Praxium, Yavin 4.
Master Skywalker was the last to walk into the Grand Audience Chamber. The assembled knights watched as their master took his seat. "You are no doubt wondering why I have called you here," Luke began. Most of the knights nodded their heads. However, it was Kip Duran who answered, "Let me guess, it is something to do with the Empire." "No," Luke continued. "This has to do with the fact that I found a Force user in the Denab system." The knight's interest was piqued. "However, this Force user is of a unique background," Luke continued. "His family is from the Corellian tradition, with a twist." Tiani then spoke up. "A twist, Master?" "I can't really explain it," Luke started. "Let's let the candidate best explain it." Luke then reached for the comlink and activated it. "You may come in," Luke spoke into the comlink. The eyes of every knight looked toward the council chamber doors, for most of the doors didn't slide open fast enough. However, when the doors finally did open, what they saw surprised them. Tanmar, in his Mandalorian armor, walked into the council chamber, and straight to Luke. Tanmar finally spoke.
"Master Skywalker, you asked for me."
At first, many of the Jedi Knights became visibly agitated. Some turned to other knights and spoke in whispers. But it was one knight who finally spoke up. "Master," Streen began, "is this some kind of joke?" "With all due respect," Streen added.
"Master Skywalker,"
Tanmar interrupted.
"with due respect, can I answer Jeti Knight Streen's question?"
"You may," Luke simply answered. "Knights of the Jetii Order," Tanmar began, after removing his helmet. I am Tanmar Waron Deoro, son of Ador Alder Drayson, Corellian Jetii Knight, captain of the Venator-class Star Destroyer Corellian Hand. He was one of 5 Jetii survivors aboard of Palpatine's execution of Order 66. My father, Tanmar continued, along with his clone first officer and friend Nexer, escaped to Mandalore to hide among the Mandoa. Why would your father hide among the Mandalorians? Cam Solasar said. He hid among the Mandoadi, children of Mandalore, because it was the last place that the Empire would have looked. With due respect, Master Skywalker, Cam began, I believe that we should test candidate Deoro. The majority of the Jedi Knights agreed. Master Skywalker, Tanmar began, I accept Jetii Knight Solasar's challenge. Tanmar continued, as the one being challenged, I challenge Jetii Knight Solasar to a duel.
What?
Cam said excitedly. Simple. The first to yield in a lightsaber duel will lose the match, Tanmar began. If I win, I will be admitted to the Praxium. If Jetii Knight Solasar wins, I will leave this place. Well, Cam, Luke started, do you accept the terms of Tanmar's challenge? After several seconds, Cam replied, yes, I do. However, this is not the place to have such a fight. If I may, Master Skywalker, Tanmar interjected, I believe that the front of the temple would be an ideal place. That is a good idea, Tanmar, Luke said. With that taken care of, Master Skywalker, the Jedi Knights, and Tanmar walked down to the front of the temple. Once they reached the area, everyone else stayed close to the temple, while the 2 combatants walked further from the temple. Since Tanmar doesn't have a saber, Cam started, could someone please? Jetii Solasar, Tanmar began. In fact, I do have a lightsaber. Of my own. As Tanmar was walking to Cam, he reached behind to the small of his back and pulled out a lightsaber. This stunned many of the Jedi Knights. Tanmar then placed his saber on the ground, and then started to take off most of his equipment. By the time Tanmar was done, all he had on was his jumpsuit and the armor that couldn't come off. Jetii Solasar, shall we begin? Tanmar said, as he ignited his saber. Everyone was surprised to see Tanmar's saber blade. The whiteness of the blade reminded them of their comrade Kiran Halcyon, who later turned out to be Corran Horn, who left a few months earlier. The men then started to circle one another. Finally, it was Tanmar who made the first move. For the first few minutes, the men were dead even. Each probed the other to find weaknesses. To those who were watching, it looked like the 2 were fighting for their lives. Finally, when Cam's saber came down at a steep angle, Tanmar force-pushed himself backwards. After a few seconds to catch his breath, Tanmar finally spoke. Jetii, you are good. Thank you, Cam replied. Jetii Solasar, do you know what my family was known for in the Corellian system? Tanmar stated. No, Cam replied. Our prowess with 2 sabers, Tanmar stated as he reached behind his back again and pulled out a second saber. As the saber cleared his person, Tanmar ignited the blade. A red-orange color shot from the emitter. This again startled many of the Jedi. Tanmar then calmly walked toward Cam Solasar. When Tanmar was within striking distance, Cam resumed his attack. However, with 2 blades to defend against, Cam quickly started to tire. As Cam stepped back, his heel hit something and he started to fall backwards. Then Cam felt a push from in front of him, and he completely lost his balance. Cam was able to stop his rolling in a favorable position. He then looked up and saw that Tanmar was close enough that he, Cam, was contemplating yielding. Then what he heard next baffled him. Tanmar's sabers were extinguished. Cam looked toward Tanmar and saw that he, Tanmar, was on his knees. What shocked everyone was what Tanmar said next. Jetii Solasar, Tanmar began in a loud voice. I yield. With that said, Tanmar got up and walked to his equipment. When he had finished putting back on his armor, minus his helmet, Tanmar walked toward Luke Skywalker. Master Skywalker, Tanmar began, per my word, I will leave the Praxium. However, I ask that when my children, when they are of age, be allowed to join the Jetii Order.
Tanmar, why did you yield? Luke asked.
I simply lost to the better man, Tanmar explained.
I will honor your request, Tanmar, Luke relented.
With that, Tanmar headed to his ship. A few minutes later, as he walked, he heard someone running toward him. Then he felt resistance through the Force as he walked. Tanmar turned around to see who was trying to stop him. Tanmar was shocked to see that Master Skywalker was the person following him. Tanmar stopped so Master Skywalker could reach him. A few seconds later, Luke did.
Tanmar, tell me the truth, Luke started. Why did you yield to Cam?
I yielded, Master Skywalker, because my actions were leading me to the dark side, Tanmar stated. All that Luke could say was,
What?
I had used the Force to trip Jetii Solusar, Tanmar began, and as I was walking toward him, all I could think of was how I was going to win. Then it hit me. Were my actions something Father would approve of? It was then that I yielded to Jetii Solusar, Tanmar finally said.
Please, come with me, Tanmar,
was all Luke said. With that, Tanmar and Luke walked toward the gathering group. In the several minutes that it took to join the group, neither man talked. The group of Jedi Knights watched the scene in confusion. My students, Luke began. After talking to Tanmar, I believe an error would occur if we were to let Tanmar leave us. Luke raised his hands to quell any arguments from his knights, and then continued. Tanmar has shown a maturity in recognizing that he has touched the dark side of the Force. I believe, Luke continued, that we should admit Tanmar to join the Order.
Location: Deoro household, Ossus. Time: present, 45 years after the Battle of Yavin.
And that, my Kiverda, is how I joined the Order, Tanmar finally said. As Tanmar looked around the bedroom, many of the older children had fallen asleep. Tanmar quietly laughed at that. Finally, one by one, Tanmar tucked in each of his grandchildren. For those who were still awake, Tanmar whispered, "Good night, my Kiverda." When Tanmar reached Amidala, he was surprised that she was still awake. An even bigger smile grew on his face. He then started to tuck her in. "Why are you still awake, my Ori Treshin, Big Fire?" Tanmar said.
Babuir, I told you, Amidala started. I wanted to hear how you joined the Order.
That is well, Tanmar said, but it is time to sleep.
Yes, Babuir,
Amidala finally said. With that, Tanmar walked out of the children's bedroom. He then walked to the roof of the house and sat in a meditative position. For the first time in many years, Tanmar looked to the sky and remembered his past. 2 hours later, Tanmar finally stood and headed to bed himself. Before he left the roof, Tanmar said in Mandalorian to no one, "I'm still alive, but you are dead. I remember you, so you are eternal."
A Mandalorian daily remembrance of those who had passed on.
As he left the roof, Tanmar started to mentally list the loved ones who had passed away.